What fan theory do you 100% accept as true? The reason each It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode starts with a date and time is because they're all testifying against each other in court. Oh Speep, it's definitely against Dennis. The Empire Strikes Back. Admiral Ozzel is a rebel spy. Everything Ozzel does in his brief bits of screen time is to the detriment of the Empire. When the probe droid finds the rebel shield generator, Ozzel tries to dismiss it as smugglers before Pete speaks out of turn and gets Vader involved. Later, Ozzel orders the fleet out of hyperspace too quickly, giving the rebels plenty of time to activate the aforementioned shield generator that Ozzel knew about. Clumsy as he is, stupid or rebel sympathizer who gave his life to give the Alliance as much time to evacuate their base as possible? I side on the latter. I approve. The town from Footloose is the same town from Tremors. The ban on dancing wasn't a puritanical attempt to control the youth. The town elders were aware of the graboid threat and banned dancing out of the fear that it would cause rhythmic vibrations waking up the creatures sleeping below the town. Kevin Bacon's character in Footloose stayed in the town, growing up to be his character in Tremors, at which point he has to try and contain the danger he inadvertently released. There was so many problems with this, but man, that's hilarious. As a massive Tremors fan, this made me laugh. Thanks for sharing. Miguel and Tulio may not be gods, but the armadillo that follows them around absolutely is. It's just helping them out because they saved it from being eaten. Bebo. I agree. When the volcano is going off, he is chasing a butterfly. And then when Tulio yells stop, Bebo stops chasing the butterfly as well. It even keeps cutting to Bebo during their conversation. Another one is his ability to walk on walls and change direction mid-air during the game. And him accidentally helping come up with a plan for the boat at the end. Amongst other things. The Jetsons and the Flintstones are living at the same time in a dystopian future where the haves live above the clouds and the have-nots are stuck on a wasted Earth. The signs include that Flintstones celebrate things like Christmas and other holidays, which doesn't make sense, and the Great Gazoo alien appears in both series. Gazoo is in the Jetsons? In Disney's Ratatouille, the old lady in the beginning of the movie living in the house next to the river is the food critic. Anton Ego's mother. In the flashback scene where he eats the ratatouille, you can see similarities of the house from the beginning. Her face and I think the bridge. That explains Remy being able to make the ratatouille that tasted exactly like his mother used to make. Oh Speeped. That Loki was controlled by the Tesseract more than he let on. His eyes glowed multiple times and he shed a tear when Thor tried to talk sense into him. Wait. There's a theory the Tesseract controlled Loki like the Mind Stone could? That is the general theory of the Avengers. Loki is not evil. He is not a villain. He is the god of mischief. He just likes peeping things up. He is not the type of person to invade a planet and maliciously murder everyone. Thanos was under control of him. Robb Stark died twice. First in his own body. And second in Grey Winds. He had a chance to see Arya moments before his death. Jane? Robb grabbed the edge of the table and forced himself to stand. Mother. He said. Grey Wind. Jon fell to his knees. He found the dagger's hilt and wrenched it free. In the cold night air the wound was smoking. Ghost? He whispered. Before their hearts could beat again he had passed on. Searching for his own. For One Eye. Sly. And Stalker. For his pack. His wolves would save him. He told himself. That was his last thought as a man. Both Robb's and Jon's last words were their wolves' names. Varamir Sixskin's last thought was living again in his wolves. And then we read it happening with him living again in One Eye. Red Alert 1's Allied victory results in the Red Alert 2/3 universe. Red Alert 1's Soviet victory leads to the Tiberium universe. Debunked by the writers themselves. But that's how it'll always be for me. Little late to the game. But the theory is that the Kyber crystal in Luke's green lightsaber is the same one from Qui-Gon Jinn's. After Kenobi defeats Darth Maul with his master's lightsaber, he would have kept it as a keepsake. Despite rebuilding his own saber, it's likely he would have retrieved it and kept it with him after the Order 66 attack. After the Empire takes over, they destroy all artifacts and memory of the Jedi in their purge of changing the history. And most Kyber crystals go towards powering the Death Star. Because of this, any lightsaber crystal would have been very difficult for Luke to find after he loses the Skywalker saber. But we know he returns to Tatooine to complete his new lightsaber, likely returning to Ben Kenobi's home for components, where he would have found Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber and recycled its crystal. I vaguely remember reading it might have been Shadows of the Empire. Come to think of it, that Luke did go back to Ben's hut to study and get supplies. This makes a lot of sense. I 100% believe the two men accompanying the woman in the original Blair Witch Project planned and successfully executed a plan to murder her while they were deep in the woods. Too many factors point to good old-fashioned murder than a supernatural occurrence. Undefined. Would you mind elaborating? The real world in the Matrix movies is just another layer of the Matrix, designed specifically to appeal to people unwilling to conform to the normal matrix. Humans in this outer matrix have confirmation of their belief that something was wrong, and get to indulge in the fantasy of being a heroic freedom fighter against the faceless evil machines, thus choosing to accept this false reality. The anomaly of the one is that he's capable of rejecting both realities, which is the reason why he had powers in the real world. Yeah, did Revolutions ever address this? I thought the cliffhanger ending of Reloaded was meant to reveal that the real world was just another Matrix. It was supposed to. The big reveal should have been that the Matrix exists is to keep human minds enslaved because the machines were actually using them like a big supercomputer cluster. It was never about electric energy storage. Studio execs killed the idea because they thought fans were too dumb to understand it. Glinda dropped Dorothy's house on the Wicked Witch of the East, not the tornado, and uses her to gain control of Oz. One of the first things Glinda tells Dorothy is that she killed the witch. They praise her so she'll accept it. And when the Witch of the West comes along, who killed her sister? Dorothy. Glinda then puts the ruby slippers on Dorothy's feet but does not tell her that she can use them to go home. Instead, she sends Dorothy to Oz in possession of objects that a witch would murder her for. Dorothy, being forced into a situation where her only salvation is Oz and her worst enemy is the Queen, inadvertently exposes the Wizard of Oz as a fraud and murders the Witch of the West. Now, who's left to rule Oz? Glinda Peepin, Witch of the North. She used Dorothy as an expendable pawn to gain control of Oz without having to leave her bubble. And when Dorothy is done upheaving the two biggest powers in Oz, Glinda sends her home and makes her think it was all a dream. She came down in a bubble. Doug. They were sisters. James Bond's primary purpose is to be a distraction to keep attention off the spies who actually spy. Villains and other spies know him. He rarely takes an alias. He makes his presence known early on and keeps messing up operations for the villains. But other spies have already infiltrated their ranks and work while Bond does as much visible damage as possible to keep the others safe. I like this one. When you think about it, he's a pretty bad spy. I read it on a fan theory post once, and it replaced my head canon. It's simple and logical. The monsters in Courage the Cowardly Dog are regular people but seem monstrous from Courage's perspective since he's cowardly. Also, they live in the middle of nowhere because his owners never take him out, so that's how he views the world. Pokédex entries are written by young trainers. When a professor sends a bunch of 10-year-olds out into the world to document Pokémon, Of course, the research can't be expected to be professional in the least. This is how we end up with the creepy legends of ghost Pokemon that might have been passed around as playground rumors. Or impossible facts like Macargo being hotter than the actual sun. There's no reason why out of all the Pokemon professors, one of them couldn't have revised their dex information and correct the tidbit about Pidgeot breaking the speed of light or Gardevoir creating black holes or Blazikens jumping over 30-story buildings. It's likely they leave the kids to their own devices without bothering to fact check. And kids, being kids, are going to exaggerate. Professor Oak just sent kids out on random errands so he could bang their moms. Ed from Ed, Edd n Eddy is mentally stunted. Which is why he's one of the dumber characters in the show despite appearing older than the other two Eds. He's about as tall as Kevin and Rolf, who are some of the oldest kids in the cul-de-sac. Also that his parents are abusive to him because of his mental handicap, literally removing the stairs when he was grounded. And his sister's attitude towards him is learned behavior from their parents. This is further reinforced by him living in the basement, having non-existent hygiene habits, and retreating into obsession with TV and sci-fi comics. In fact, the other two Eds come from troubled homes as well, which is why they're social outcasts in the cul-de-sac. It's been heavily implied that Eddie's parents knew his older brother was physically abusive to him and let it happen. Meanwhile, Double D's parents spend zero time with him, and won't even directly communicate with their son, choosing instead to leave him notes for chores instead. I like the theory more that Ed's parents wanted a girl and when they've got a boy decided to roll with it for a while. In an old baby photo of Ed, we see him naked with a girly bow tied above his head. But that didn't work and decided to try again with success this time. This is why they've never cared about Ed. They've never wanted a son. In the school report episode we hear Ed describe what would happen if his parents found out. The school would tell Sarah. Sarah would tell Mom. Mom would tell Dad. And Dad would just stay on the couch and watch TV. It seems Ed really loves his parents. And the love is not returned. In the Grounded episode, Ed is willing to accept his punishment, no matter how cruel it seems, because he loves his parents. He cares for Sarah because he loves her and doesn't want to disappoint his parent. In the episode in which Ed has a rock in his shoe, we see what would happen is Ed wouldn't care at all. Sarah threatens Ed, and all Ed does is yell back. The only authority Sarah has over Ed is the one he decides to give her. We can see that more in the episode when Sarah is sick and Ed is genuinely worried about her. I remember all of this, and never thought about it like this at all, but it sounds accurate. It's interesting how you can dig in psychologically so much with things that don't even appear to have depth until you start to dig a little.